All right, how's it going? Welcome back to another React beginner interview challenge problem. Now, I don't know if this is truly like what you'd be asked in an interview, but I'm kind of just titling that because I think this is something that might be fair game in a junior interview position, or maybe like a more like mid. Regardless, it's a cool challenge problem. You should try to solve it yourself. So before you watch me solve this for you all, like be sure to pause and like understand the problem that you're trying to solve and implement yourself, and then come back and watch me do it. Or if you just want to watch me code, we can do that too. So I have an application here where we have a basic app component that has a div, right? And if I go over to here, we look at this, we don't have anything displayed. So the problem statement of what we're trying to solve is assume that the person tells you you need to create a web application where the user can click anywhere on this page. And when they click on this position, you need to put a circle somewhere, okay? And then after you place the circle, after they've placed many circles, there are two buttons for undoing and redoing those click positions. So that is the problem statement. Try to solve that yourself, but let's just go ahead and dive into it and see if we can kind of figure this out. So the first thing I would do is let's just go ahead and add an on ClickListener here. And I'm going to call it handle place circle. And this ClickListener, let's just go ahead and define a function inside this component itself. And this is going to take in an E. And we're using TypeScript, so obviously you want to type your parameters or you're going to get complaints saying like implicit innies or whatever. But if you're good at TypeScript, you don't really need to be if this is like a junior interview position. But you'd have to type that E parameter with react.mouseEvent. And I think that should be good enough. Sometimes you can pass generics here and you can say like React, like I say HTML div element, if you want to be more specific about what this E would have. But it's good that if you know TypeScript, like, make sure you type your stuff. It really shows that you know what you're doing in terms of like doing proper TypeScript. But what I want to kind of visualize is if we were to print out what happens when you click on the div, does this actually print anything to the console? Let's just go ahead and do that. And I'm going to click around and notice that nothing prints out. So we need to figure out why that's not happening. If I go ahead and hover over the elements, we see that we have an app div, and you click on it, it has absolutely no height. So if you see here, it says 742 times 0. That means there's no height to it. So your click listener is never going to fire because there's no like dimensions that it can actually listen on. So a quick solution is we look at this component, it imports a app CSS file. So if I open up that app CSS, I can style that app ID. I think it's an app ID. Actually, it's an app class. So it's good to flex your CSS and say, hey, I want to style that app class. And I want to basically give it some height. So I'm going to say height 100 VH, and that'll make this expand 100% to the window. So if I hover over this now, you will see that this is now 100% of the window. But there's also a ton of padding and margin on the body and the root. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those two things. Let's just go ahead and find this and delete, I'll say margin 0. Delete that, delete the padding and text align. So hopefully that puts us in a better position. There's still some margin on the body. You can see there the body has like a little bit of margin, and you can kind of go to this computed tab to kind of show that there's 8 margin on the body, and we don't want that. So how do you get rid of that? Well, go to index.css, and you could just style the body and say margin 0. And now if you look over here, there is no margin or body on margin or padding on anything. But if you look at the app, you'll see that it actually has a height. And if I were to click, we get those click events. Okay, that's exactly what we wanted to get. So what we just kind of showed, if this was like during an interview, you showed that you have some type of experience with styling components, styling HTML. You understand like margins and widths and body. You understand how to make something be a certain height. Those are all good things to know. Now, obviously, you might not have those memorized, but it's probably good to memorize some of these basic things. So at this point, we have verified that when you click somewhere on this div, it prints out a console. But how do we get the actual XY location? Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't remember. So show that you know how to use the console. You know how to dive into these events and dive into the console logs and understand like where did the person click? Well, it looks like client X and client Y could potentially be what we want. There's also page X, page Y. There's also screen X and screen Y. Now the further kind of check, I'm gonna go ahead and click on the top left here, which is usually 0, 0. If I were to go here, let's try to figure out which one looks the closest to 0, 0. And honestly, it looks like client X and client Y. Someone will probably call me out in the comments and say that we shouldn't be using this, but I'm gonna go ahead and use it anyway. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the client X and the client Y using some object destructuring from that event. And now we have the XY location of where they clicked. So the next part of the challenge was like, how do you put a circle where the user clicked? Well, in React, if you ever want to dynamically change the page and show and render out some stuff based on data, you have to use some type of state. So I'm gonna go ahead and just say const points and set points equals useState. I'm gonna bring in that useState hook, which will allow us to kind of track where these points were clicked. And that will allow us to also create DOM elements of circles where the user clicked. So go ahead and set that equal to an empty array. And then if you really want to like show that you know TypeScript, what you could do is you could say, well, I'm going to actually make this a type of point. So I'm going to say type point is equal to that. You could also say t point. It's whatever convention you want to use. But I'll say this has an x, which is a number, and then also has a y, which is a number. And then you can pass this to your useState using a TypeScript generic. And that really highlights your knowledge of TypeScript. So again, this is optional. TypeScript is something that you should probably understand, but you don't really need to know for most junior positions. So you want to stress the fact that you understand how state works in React. So whenever a user clicks, you want to basically say set points, and I want to update the current array of points with a new point. So I'm going to go ahead and say dot, dot, dot points and kind of explain why, you have to do the spread operator on the points, because the way React works with state, this is not going to re-render this component unless you pass in a new reference to a new array, right? So that's why we kind of take the old array, we do a spread, because this is going to do a shallow copy on the original array. It's going to put those inside the new array reference, and I'm going to go ahead and just put a new point. So I'll say x is equal to client x and y is equal to client y. So save that, and everything should be good. So let's show that we know how the React Components tab works, right? Let's show the interviewer that, hey, you know actually how to like verify things when you code. So I'm gonna go ahead and look at the app here, and every time I click on the page, I want to highlight that there is some state that gets put into an array. So we know that our code is working perfectly fine with updating React state. And that's pretty awesome. So the next points that I want to kind of make is, how do you display a circle for every location that the user clicked? Okay, well, we have this state that has an array of points. How do you render out a collection in React? Well, you have to do a map. So I'm going to say curly brace points.map, and I will just go ahead and take the point here, and we're going to make a div, and I'm going to give a class name of point. How about that? Super generic. And go ahead and close that off and make sure that everything is, good, formatted correctly. And what we want to do, we could do two things. First of all, the first thing is we want to take the point that has the XY position, and we want to style this potentially using inline styles. So I could do this and show that this is how you style in React. You basically have curly braces, you need to pass in an object, and for every property of that object is going to apply CSS styles to this div. Okay, so we want to say position of maybe, no, I'm not going to worry about position right now. I'm just going to say left is equal to point.x, and then I'll say top is equal to point.y. Now, sometimes you do actually have to append pixels. I might just do this just because, but it's always good to kind of test things out and make sure it works. So before we even have to draw out a circle, let's just do a 0. This should be good enough, or an O. Just do a lowercase o. How about that? So now every time I click on the page, let me do a hard refresh. Every time I click, you'll see an O pop up. But you'll notice that we get an error in the console because key is not defined. And also, why are they all stacked up like this? Well, if you know anything about positioning in CSS, these are all kind of given normal positioning for divs, which I believe is block. Or sorry, not positioning, I'm sorry, display. These are all display of blocks, but if you wanted to position them relative or absolute where the user clicked, then you probably want to use position of absolute. So this is where you kind of flex your CSS knowledge and you say, well, I have a class of point here. Let's go ahead and go into app CSS. I'm going to make a dot point. I'm going to go ahead and give this a display of inline block. In fact, I don't even know if you need to give this a display of inline block, but the positioning is very important. So I'm going to say position of absolute. Okay, so with absolute positioning, it's going to basically put those points wherever these left and top X's and Y's were pressed. So I'm gonna go ahead and refresh the page and make sure that it's going to put circles pretty close to where we clicked. Okay, this looks pretty good. Now, obviously you'd have to, subtract some offset or something like that. And this seems like it's really off by a lot. So maybe even using client X and client Y was not the proper thing that we should be using. Maybe we should be using page X and page Y. I'm not really sure. But I mean, I wouldn't like dock you points if you use the wrong thing here. Nope, that's still not the right one. Let's just go back to client X and client Y. It doesn't really matter. You could also just subtract some offset. Like if you get stuck on a problem, like don't worry too much. Just do a quick fix to like make it look a little bit better. And then say that, hey, I'll go Google it on Stack Overflow to find a better solution. Again, you could also subtract an offset here if you wanted this to be more like exactly where the person clicked. So then you can kind of flex your CSS knowledge and be like, well, instead of just rendering out circle text, because now the user can actually like highlight these, which is kind of weird. I'd rather it be a div that has a real circle in it. Okay, so let's go back, and instead of rendering any type of circle here, I'm gonna go ahead and go back to app CSS, and I'm gonna go ahead and just put on the point itself, I'm gonna say border radius, I believe it's like 50%, and I can say width of 5 pixels, height of 5 pixels, and then background of, to make it blue. So this should hopefully make some circles, and it looks pretty good. Now again, the offset's going to be depending on, how big you made these circles. So maybe I should make them like 1010, and the offset should be maybe -5.5. So that looks pretty good. All right, so congrats. We have like a way for users to click and place points on a screen, but that only solves one part of the problem statement. How do we allow the user to redo and undo clicks? So let's try to figure that out. And if you know anything about data structures, you would probably want to use a stack or a queue. So I think the easiest thing to worry about first is maybe the undo. And the way you can do undos is basically just remove the last point that you added here. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and go to the top up here. I'm going to make a button. And when you click on this button, we are going to call a handle undo. And inside that button, it's going to say undo. And I'm also going to make a function here called handle undo. And this is going to basically just remove the last point added to the array. So it should be pretty easy to do, right? And if you know your JavaScript and you know the array methods on the array prototype, how do you do that? Well, you just basically say set points. And I'm going to go ahead and call this with a new array, because that's how you have to update state in React. So ... and I will say points. And I'm actually going to only grab the first set of elements and exclude the last one. Okay. Now, another approach you can do as well is you can just say like new points is equal to ... points. And then I can say new points dot pop. Okay, that'll remove the last element from this array here. And this is using like mutation, which is fine. But in order for React to actually like be reactive, you have to set points here to that new points array. So hopefully this works. Let's just go ahead and see if this works. I'm going to click, 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 and then undo, undo, undo. Now it doesn't actually work because I think this button is actually hidden by the points div. Okay, so how do we fix that? I think it's a matter of giving the button some z-index, or if you just wanted to kind of like do a quick fix, like honestly, sometimes it's better just to like get something working to verify it works. And now you can actually click undo. So I'm gonna click some points and I'll click undo, and notice that they go away. The same order that I added them. They're going away. So pretty cool. Now again, like the other problem statement was like we have to add a redo. So how do you do a redo? Well, basically you have to keep track of the ones you just undid so that you can push them back to the end of the array. So I'm gonna go ahead and say a redo here, and I'll say handle redo. And we'll make a function here and just say function handle redo. And let's try to figure this out. Let's walk through this. So we know that we just popped off a point here. But when you redo, you want to kind of pop off from some type of different data structure, right? We need to keep track of the ones that we just got rid of when we undid. so that we can reapply them. Kind of confusing, but let's just go ahead and see if we can do this again with some type of state. So I'm gonna go ahead and say const popped points, set popped points, and we're gonna keep track of this as well. It's gonna be a very similar data structure to this. Let's just go ahead and do that. I'm just gonna call this popped and set popped. It's probably not that, it's probably better to be more verbose, but I'm just gonna keep it simple. So every time you pop off a new data point, I'm going to keep track of that. I'm going to say popped point is equal to that. And I'm going to go ahead and push that to the popped array here, popped point. Okay. So I want to verify this works. Again, like show that you have like some command or some dominance over your dev tools. So when I click on these different things and I click undo, let's make sure that that second state array is actually getting stuff pushed onto it. Looks like it is. And let's just make sure that we get our logic correct in our head. If I click on the top left corner and then the bottom right corner, and then I click undo, that should push a point that's pretty big in terms of X and Y into my state down here. So let's make sure. Yep. Do it again. It should make this one be empty, and it should push again index 0. Or sorry, index 1, it should push that new point. So now if I want to redo, how do you do a redo? Well, I need to take, oh, I'm sorry, my screen was hiding that, wasn't it? But hopefully you understand what I was trying to talk about. But when I redo, I want to take this point that we just pushed onto this new array, and I want to push it back onto this one, okay? And we've already done that, so that's nothing new. What I could basically do is just say points.push, and we are going to have to pop off from the other array. So I'm going to say popped point is equal to popped dot pop. This is super confusing. I think I should name this better. But it is what it is. So I think this is complaining because when you pop off of an empty array, you could potentially get nothing. So I want to make sure that I'm going to disable this. I'm going to say that there is no popped point. I'm just going to go ahead and return. Do not allow this to do any further damage if you can't undo anything, right? And then new points could probably be, I guess we should keep that. All right, same thing if we're over here. So when we click on redo, like I showed in the dev tools, we want to take the very last element, which we already know how to do with the array prototype pop method. Take that last element and just push it into the other array. So that's what we're doing. We're taking the very last element of that new array called popped, and we're going to push that into points. Now we want to make sure that we also remove it from popped as well, which I believe this will do. I'm going to go ahead and say const new popped, not pooped. New popped is equal to new popped.pop. Hold up. So if ever at one point you feel like you're just doing stuff, you're not really explaining it really well, like take a breather, take a step back. Let's undo a little bit. Now, let me walk you through what I was about to do because I don't think I explained it. So when you click on redo, you can't just pop from the popped array. You want to make a new array. So I'm going to say const new popped is equal to ... popped. Okay. And then we're going to pop from that new array so that when we update the state, I'll say set popped is new popped. And then we also want to make sure that we say set points, new points. And again, I think I kind of got way ahead of myself, and I apologize for that if you guys are kind of lost. But in React, again, you have to provide new references to arrays if you want it to update on your page. So I'm actually going to say a new points here, and this is going to be the spread operator on the old points. And we're going to just basically update state like this. Now, again, this is complaining in TypeScript because like there's a potential that you popped off nothing. So I'm going to say if there is no popped, again, just return so that we don't have a potential edge case that'll break our application. So in moment of truth, let's go and test this. We should be able to basically refresh the page, click on some points. I'm going to click undo. I'm going to click redo. And notice that it's actually not working. What it is doing is it is removing from the state down here, which is good, but it's not pushing it back into this one. Now we got to figure that out. Like, how do you debug live? You know, it's kind of stressful, but It's only 6 lines of code, right? We can figure this out, I guess 7. So the new popped array is equal to the old one with the new reference. The new points array is equal to the old points with the new reference. We are going to pop off the latest from popped, the popped array, right? And then we're going to push that into points. Now here is my bug. I need to push that into new points. Okay. Now there's probably a way that you can actually make this a little bit cleaner. Now, in fact, I don't need to, I could probably just do this. And I could probably just make sure that the new points we're pushing in, I'll just do that. Okay. Let me undo. I think I'm messing this up a little bit. So I think this code will work fine, but it's always good to refactor your code for clarity and make sure that like you're doing the right thing. So I'm super confused with my own code, which is not a good sign. So I think we should clean it up. I'm making this new popped array, which we basically need to remove something from it, which I think this is fine. But the new points, we might not even need. What we could do is we could just say ... points, and then I could say popped point. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and try that out like this. And that removes 2 lines out of that kind of complex statement, which makes it a little bit cleaner. Is there a way we can clean this up more? Probably. We can probably just do like a array spread and do like a slice operator or something, but just do whatever works. Figure out a solution that works and don't get too caught up on solutions. So let's try it again. I'm gonna click some points and I'm gonna click undo, 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 and then I'm gonna click redo, redo, redo. And then if I click it again, it does nothing. Okay, so we made sure there's no edge cases. Now you could take it a step further, right? Show initiative during an interview. Be like, well, I want to disable the redo button if there's nothing else that you can redo. Okay, that's cool. You show that you can do some initiative. What I'm going to do is disable this button, disable like this, and I'm going to disable the button if there's no more points that we can pop. So I'm going to say if popped.length is equal to 0. Let's just disable it. Okay, so let's make sure this works. So by default, it is, let me refresh the page. I'm gonna click some points. I'm gonna click undo, and then redo is now active. Click it, can't click it again. Same thing with undo. If there is no points already on the page, like take the initiative, show that you care about edge cases, you care about user experience. Let's make sure that if the points length is 0, then you can't undo either. Okay, so you actually need to click on the board first before any of these buttons work. I'll click some places, click undo, and I'll click redo. Now it's also good to point out that like we're getting errors here, right? You want to write good code, right? You want to show that you know how to write good code. And whenever you see errors pop up in your console, you want to kind of fix them. So this one is saying that all your .map, you need to have a key property. Let's just fix it, right? And so show you understand like whenever you're doing the map property in React JSX, your first parent element needs to have some type of unique key so that React can identify with the elements in the array and properly update. In our case, we don't have a unique identifier. I mean, technically we could do like the XY, but a user could potentially click XYs multiple times on the same point. So I'm going to do the index here. Now you might want to explain that sometimes using the index isn't the best way to use a key, and obviously it's kind of not preferred. If you have any type of eslint set up, it would complain about this. But in our situation, it might be okay because we're not like sorting the array. We're not, slicing things out of the array. Let's just try it out. Now we don't have errors on the page. I can click undo, I can click redo, and we solve the original problem. Now the rest is just kind of gravy, right? Like you can go through here, you can try to refactor code. If you want to, you could try to figure out if there's a better way to write this code. But overall, I mean, I think you solved the issue, and that is good. You solved the problem and you kind of explained your thought process along the way. And that is the point that you're trying to do in an interview, is to not only just solve the problem, but make sure that you can explain your thought process. Because when you're working on a team with other people, you may have to join a Zoom call. You may have to explain some type of code, explain some architecture, explain some solution that it makes sense in your head, but when you explain it out loud to others, they may have no idea how you actually solved it or understand, the approach you took. So communicating the code is definitely another part of the whole process. And that is what someone's going to be watching and waiting for you to explain as you type and try to solve these problems. Anyway, if you have comments of different approaches I could have taken for this, feel free to leave a comment. And also, if you have another like interview type of React practice problem or challenge you want me to do on my channel, text it to me, or not text me. Get on my Discord. I have a Discord. You can send me messages like, hey, I have this really cool idea that might take you 20 to 30 minutes to do on your YouTube channel. Check it out. Here's a cool challenge. I'd be willing to try doing that. And like always, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, leave comments, press the bell icon, help my channel grow. It really helps me out. If my stuff has helped you out, then help me out by helping me grow. Anyway, have a good day, happy coding, and good luck if you are doing any type of interviews and you're doing these things for some practice in React. Have a good day and happy coding.